Associate Justice Sabrina Shizue McKenna has served on the Hawaiʻi Supreme Court since March 2011. She is the first openly LGBTQ Asian American justice to serve on the State Court of Last Resort. She grew up in Japan before graduating from the University of Hawaiʻi at Manoa in its William S. Richardson School of Law, where she served as a law review editor-in-chief. She was a civil litigator, general counsel to a Japan-based group of companies, and a WSRSL faculty member before serving as a Hawaii State Trial Court judge from 1993 to 2011, presiding over civil, criminal, and family matters. She has been involved in various Hawaii initiatives, as well as domestic and international lectures on women's and civil rights issues. She serves on the board of International Association of LGBTQ Judges and on the co-chairs of the American Judicature Society's Judicial Diversity Committee. Her awards include the ABA's Margaret Brent Women Lawyers of Achievement in 2023, the Stonewall Awards in 2021, and NAPABA's Daniel K. Inouye Trailblazer Award in 2015. Please join me in welcoming Sabrina McKenna, Associate Justice of the Hawaiʻi Supreme Court.
Aloha and mahalo, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna move this because can I move this? Yes, I can, because I'm right-brained. So I like to look left. So I have my notes, I'm gonna have my notes over here, and then I can glance at my notes while I'm talking to you. And I'll move this over, but I'm not really gonna speak into it. But I'll have it, it might catch a little bit. Okay, so aloha, welcome, and thank you for having me. I'm honored to be able to be here. And thank you for the introduction. I'm Sabrina Shizue McKenna. I was born and raised in Japan, spent 6 months in the Philippines. My mother was my mother wasn't American. My mother was Japanese from Hokkaido. My father was from the Midwest, and they met when my mother served as the Secretary Interpreter to the Provost Marshal, which is the base cop for Chitose Air Force Base in Hokkaido during the Korean War. My father was a tank battalion commander for the Army, and they met, and apparently he was a friend of her boss, and after several months of dating, he apparently said, if I come back alive, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And then he was able to come back alive, and he ended up resettling in Japan as an educator. He was a professor of psychology for what is now University of Maryland Global Campus, where they have all the courses for the military personnel. So I grew up in a household that really valued education, and so I'm really, really glad to see all of the university people here. I grew up speaking Japanese. Japanese is my first language. I'm bilingual, I'm bicultural. I grew up in a multi-religious background. I went to Sunday school. I also went to Buddhist funerals and Shinto weddings. And I would consider myself spiritual, but not religious. But unfortunately, my father died when I was 9 of a heart attack from smoking too many cigarettes. And back in the old days, the military used to just give cigarettes to military personnel. He got hooked and he never could quit. And he died of a heart attack in his 40s when I was 9. So I pretty early on experienced this change in social status where my father was a respected professor, and then my mother had an associate degree in business from a business college, but she needed to work for the U.S. military so that I could continue to go to U.S. military schools. And then so she worked the night shift at the U.S. military hotel at Yokota Air Force Base, and I really saw how people are treated differently based on race, ethnicity, gender, and socioeconomic status. I'll never forget one night I was in my mom's waiting for her, and I was in the office next door so people couldn't see me, but like a military sergeant called and said, hey, my kid peed in the bed, I need someone to change my sheets. And I remember my mom saying, there's no one here, I'm the only person here. We don't have any housekeeping staff here now at this time of the night. It was like 10 o'clock or so. But I have fresh, clean sheets here. If you can come down, I can give them to you. And I remember him coming and throwing the wet sheets in her face. And I remember thinking, wow, I can't imagine that people treat people like this. And so I remember as a young person vowing that I was going to get a good education, and that if I ever got into a position of authority, I would never treat people the way they treated my mom. So I did, because my dad died and I was the only child, I became very independent. I read a lot. I became a voracious reader. In Japan, also in the winter, the sun sets at 4. I mean, you know, I was like, it was dark, and I would do a lot of reading. So, but my dad's dream was to retire teaching at the University of Hawaiʻi. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to retire and then just become an adjunct at Manoa and have me go to school at UH. And my dad was buried at Punch Bowl, and I knew that my mother eventually would be. So, you know, Japanese style, you gotta take care of your parents' grave, right? So I decided I was gonna come to the University of Hawaii. So in 1974, so you can figure out my age, I was born in 57. I graduated from high school a year early, so I was 16. And I started at UH, walked on to the first tryouts for the UH first intercollegiate Wahine basketball team. And I made the team because there weren't that many people, right? I made the team, and then the coach, Patsy Dung, offered me a scholarship. And I said, what? Why am I getting a scholarship? You know, I just wanted to play. I had paid non-resident tuition, you know, and I was like, I can't believe it. All I wanted to do was play basketball, because I had played basketball for the U.S. Military High School League in Japan, and I had also played for the military women's team, because back then they had a military women's team, but not enough women in the military, so they let dependents play. So I got to play on that team too when I was in high school. So I played a lot of basketball in high school. Came here, tryouts, made the team, got a scholarship. I'm like, why? And then I found out it was because of this law called Title IX, which had passed in June of 1972. And I'm like, well, what is this law? And I found out that before this law, in 1972, University of Hawaii had no women's athletics. And in 1974, there was high school volleyball here, but there was no girls' high school basketball for like the OIA. And the ILH, I recall, they just had like a tournament. They didn't really have a league play. So there was very little basketball, women's sports in Hawaii at that time. Very few opportunities. And Title IX was a law that said that any educational institution receiving federal funds, whether from primary, secondary, or university, cannot discriminate on the basis of sex, and cannot have to afford equal opportunities for participation. And that's why the University of Hawaii, after Title IX passed, started a Wahine athletics program with a $5,000 budget by a woman named Dr. Donis Thompson, who was the director of women's athletics. She knew of this person, Patsy Dung, who became my coach, who was a Farrington High School PE teacher. And because there were so few opportunities for girls back then, she formed an organization called the Kalihi Jets to allow the girls to play sports. It started with like volleyball, then added softball and basketball, because back then there was nothing for the girls. And so Dr. Thompson knew of Patsy Dung, asked her to coach the first UH Wahine basketball team. And Patsy, after a long day at work, would come to UH Clum Gym back then to start coaching our team at 5:30. So we practiced at dinner time every day after the guys. And I remember sometimes we're banging on the door, let us in, because they had the doors locked and they wouldn't open the door even at 5:30. It's like, it's our turn, you know, we shouldn't have to wait, right? You get to practice from 3:30 to 5:30. We don't get to practice till 5:30. I mentioned Patsy Dung because she was a real inspiration to me. And she was a woman who went to Roosevelt and then went on to Michigan State way back when, but 3 days ago she died at age 87. And she was a real inspiration to me, so I want to honor her memory. She taught me a lot. She taught me a lot. So I thought, wow, Title IX. And then I found out that this law was written and championed and passed through Congress by this person who was born in Maui, graduated from Maui High, went on to school in the mainland and got put into the international dorm, which was only for people of color, right? And so she fought against the segregation at the University of Nebraska dormitories. She got that policy changed. She came back and graduated from the University of Hawaiʻi because she fell ill, but she was really, really smart. She was the first woman student council president at Maui High School, and she was such a leader and so smart. But when she came back to Hawaii, she wanted to go to med school. No med schools would admit her because she was a woman. So then somebody said, well, why don't you try law school? She applied to law school. She got into the University of Chicago Law School. They admitted her as an international student. I guess Chicago didn't know that Hawaii was a territory then. It was considered part of the United States. But they admitted her as an international student. And she was like, if you look at the class picture, it's just all these white guys and her in her law school picture. And then she came back to Hawaii. She married a Haole guy, a geologist named John Mink. So she comes back to Hawaii. They have a baby. They come back to Hawaii. She can't get a job. She can't get a job. Nobody will hire her. She's a woman. She's a mother. Nobody will hire her. So, you know, she worked for she finally got a job at the Attorney General's office, but she ran for state office in the 50s, State House, State Senate, and then in 1964, she became the first woman of color elected to the United States Congress in 1964. In 1972, she got this law passed called Title IX. And this woman's name is Patsy Takemoto Mink from Maui. It's really important that her legacy be known and considered, that this tiny Japanese American woman from Hawaii, I think she was one of the most important people of the 20th century. Because of Title IX, in 1972, only 7% of US law school graduates were women. Only 9% of US medical school graduates were women. They routinely discriminated against allowing women. And Title IX is for equal opportunity. How many male nurses do you think there were in 1972? There were certain professions that were favored, certain educational paths favored toward women, certain ones favored toward men. And so Title IX says you can't discriminate. We've come a long way. We're not all the way there yet, but we have definitely come a long way. So in any event, I was just so inspired, and I thought, wow, the law can make this much difference in the lives of people. And because of Title IX, I got a basketball scholarship. I was able to be admitted to the University of Hawaiʻi William S. Richardson School of Law. My class had about 1/3 women. I will tell you right now, the UH Law School has about 60% women. All law students in the United States now, about 55% are women. So that's the difference Title IX has made. Medical school now, too, I understand, at UH is more women than men. But so, and then, so Patsy Mink Takemoto Mink was a super inspiration for me to think about the law and how people can make a difference for equality, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Another inspiration for me was a Wahine basketball player, a volleyball player who graduated in 1976. Her name is Marilyn Moniz. And she was a Wahine volleyball player, and in 1976, she got what's called the Jack Bonham Award, which is for the best scholar athlete at the University of Hawaiʻi system. Back then, now they give it to one guy and one woman, but back then they only gave it to one person, and she was the first woman to receive this award. And then she went to law school, and I remember thinking, wow, athletes can go to law school. And then I thought about Patsy Mink, and I'm like, you know what, I think I want to go to law school. So because actually I was studying undergrad to be a Japanese English interpreter. Because Japanese is my first language, I'm fluent in Japanese. So I was going to be an interpreter, but then I thought, you know what, I don't want to just interpret what other people are saying or translate for other people. I want to give people a voice and then also to have a voice myself. So I decided to go to law school. I graduated in 1982 from Richardson Law. And you know, I hope you folks aren't going through things like this now, but like when I interviewed, we have on-campus interviews for jobs, for summer jobs, and I remember one of the partners, a Japanese American guy, asking me, hey, if you come to work for our law firm, you realize you can't leave for PTA meetings during the day. I'm like, okay, yes, I know that. And he goes, well, do you plan to work for us for a couple years, get married, and quit? I was like, you gotta be kidding. I mean, you know, I was very nice, very nice. And I said, can I ask you a question? And he said, sure. And I said, do you ask your male applicants these questions? And then he was kind of taken aback, but he said, well, you know, he said, no, you know, anyway. So right after the interview, I reported him to the campus, the recruiting center. And I said, this interviewer, he's a named partner. He's still a named partner at a prominent law firm. I'm not going to name him. He's very, very nice to me now. But I said, I said, he's asking illegal questions, and this cannot continue. That night, he called and offered me a job, but I said, no, thank you. And I decided to go work for a different firm, which had people that were actually supportive from the beginning, right? So I'm going to backtrack because I forgot to mention one thing that I was going to mention. When I started playing basketball here in 1974, one of my teammates is from Haiku Village. And I would come out here all the time and hang out at Kaneohe District Park with a lot of people from the Windward side. And just, you know, I was just this young 16, 17-year-old kid. But some of these people were like Frank Hewitt and a guy named George Helm. And so when I think back, I realize how lucky I was from the beginning to be exposed to people that became Hawaiian leaders. You know, as a freshman, I was exposed to these people. They wouldn't know who I am, but I was just this young kid kind of like hanging out. But I was really influenced by, you know, like George Helm, Kaho'olawe, and all that stuff. And anyway, so I have really fond memories. This is 50 years ago. I was hanging out at Kaneohe District Park with my friends here. So in any event, after law school, I went to work for a firm called Goodsell, Anderson, Quinn and Stifel. I did civil litigation. And, you know, I think I started some of the stuff about, you know, trying to help people. I was asked to serve on, and I served on the Honolulu County Committee on the Status of Women, and then I served on the board of an organization that provides pro bono legal services, which means free legal services to indigent people that don't have money. And I went to the managing partners of the firm and I said, hey, you know, as lawyers, you're supposed to, they pay by the hour, and you're supposed to bill a certain number of hours. It's 1,800 basically in Hawaii. And I said, can you create a billing category for what is now Volunteer Legal Services Hawaii, and allow associates, not the partners, but the young lawyers, to bill 50 hours a year toward that, to help people that can't afford services. So this is like family court cases and stuff. And the partnership, lo and behold, said yes. So it was great, and to this day, that law firm Goodsell is the most, provides the most pro bono hours to the Volunteer Legal Services Hawaii. In the mid-'80s, there was a second wave of Japanese investment, and one of the clients was buying like golf courses and hotels in Waikiki and in other parts of the state. And he asked me to become in-house counsel. So I figured I was close to partnership, but I decided, hey, this is kind of interesting. I would like to travel and see the world. So I traveled around the world with the owner of this company, making an investment, basically real estate investments. You know, traveling first class, flying on what is now, it doesn't even exist anymore, but a supersonic jet called the Concorde that was transatlantic, you know, just flying first class, drinking the best Bordeaux wine, staying at the Ritz, staying at the Waldorf Towers. What a life. And then I realized, wow, I'm around a lot of rich, powerful people that are not happy people. And after about 3 years, and then the Berlin Wall fell, we had just come, it was still the Soviet Union, we had traveled across the Soviet Union looking for investment opportunities. We ended up not investing in the Soviet Union, now Russia. Well, it was just the Russia part of the Soviet Union. But Berlin Wall fell, and I decided, you know what? I wanted to give back to this. It was time for me to go into public service. I had all this great experience, international experience, great law experience, you know, jury trials. But I decided I wanted to give back to the community that had given me so much, the people of Hawaii. So I decided, how am I going to do that? And I remembered when I was a first-year law student, one of my law professors had been appointed to become a judge, and I'm thinking, wow, law professors or lawyers can become judges. And then at that time, there was a woman, a Japanese American woman, who became the first, only the second and the third woman to be appointed a judge in Hawaii, the first non-haole woman. Her name is Marie Nakanishi Milks, right? And she became a mentor to me. So I decided I'm going to apply to be a judge. And in Hawaii, to be a judge under our state constitution, there's a committee, and they choose who they think is the 4 to 6 best people, and then the name is submitted for selection. The first time I applied, I didn't make the list, okay? But I was really, really lucky to get a job as an assistant professor at the law school. So I taught at the law school for 2.5 years, and then a woman who had been 2 years ahead of me in law school and was also a friend said, you know what, she was a judge and she got promoted to the circuit court, and she said, Sabrina, I'm going to help you apply for my position. And she helped me through the entire application process. And then I did make the list the second time, and then I got selected. So in November 29th, 1993, I was sworn in to become a district court judge here. And then in early 1995, so to backtrack, this is about when I'm like 30 years old, right? So when I was 25, I came out to my mom as a lesbian, and she was not very supportive. But then she got cancer, and so she retired in 1991 when I started teaching, and I brought her to Hawaii, and she lived here until 1997 when she died. But when in 1995, it looked like she had a recurrence, and I thought, I'm going to regret it if she dies without ever seeing a grandchild. So this is 1995, so it's like 30 years ago. It was kind of unusual, but I went to a sperm bank, and I got pregnant. And when I was interviewed for circuit court by the new governor, Ben Cayetano, I had just tried to get pregnant, and I wasn't pregnant yet, but I was trying to get pregnant at that time. And I had my first baby in February of 1996, and he's now a lawyer in New York. And then and then a woman entered my life, and she became my partner. We joked about it, like she fell in love with my kid first, really, is what happened. Not with me, but it was my kid. And then I said, with her in my life, I think I can have one more. And I wanted to give my mom more incentive to live, because she took care of my older son every day. And then in August of 1997, I was successful in getting pregnant, but unfortunately my mom died in October of 1997 of cancer. So I had my daughter in April of 1997, same sperm donor, and then my then partner gave birth to another son, same sperm donor, 4 years later. So I have 3 children now. It's great. They're my joy. But anyway, so I was working for this Japanese company, and I burned out, and then I was a law professor in 1991 when I brought my mother over. And then one of the things is, at that time is, when you're dealing with family stuff, I don't think I was as productive as a law professor as I should have been or could have been if I wasn't dealing with taking care of my mother. But, life is like that. You're going to go through these phases that sometimes you got to prioritize family. But I was really lucky to get a judgeship 2.5 years later. And just as that judge helped me, her name is Judge Bambi Hefo. She helped me. Since I became a judge, I have taken my responsibility to try to help others as people have helped me, right? I was a criminal judge, a civil judge, and a family court judge. And in family court, I learned certain things. I headed family court from 2009 to 2011 when I joined this court. But as a family court judge, I learned there were all these studies that we read, and I learned that like about a third of homeless youth are LGBTQ plus, right? Actually, the transgender community it's really bad. And I learned that LGBTQ youth are 4 times as likely to attempt suicide. But I also learned that LGBTQ youth that come from families that reject them are 8 times as likely to attempt suicide as LGBTQ youth that come from families that accept them. I also learned that whereas about 80% of white kids come out to their parents, it goes down to about 70% for Hispanic or Latino, about 60% for Black, and it was only 50% for Asian and Pacific Islanders. And why? Why are Asian and Pacific Islanders not as likely to come out to their families? It's because we know our parents' attitudes toward the LGBTQ community because we're growing up with them, right? We know that they're more likely to reject us, which is what happened to my mother, initially with my mother. And it took a long time for me dealing with my mother. I tried to help her because she wouldn't go to counseling. I said, Mom, you should talk to somebody about your daughter being a lesbian because she was having such a hard time with it. But she wouldn't go to counseling. And it's kind of ironic that I'm the one that had to help her. I became her counselor. It's not your fault. It's not anything you did. And it's okay. I can be happy. Because remember until 1973, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychological Association included homosexuality as a mental disorder until 1973, and that was when I was a senior in high school. So, my mom's from the generation that being gay is a psychological illness, right? And we now know that's not true, right? But that's how it was treated 50 years ago. And my mom was born in 1923, She's from a completely different generation, so I had to help her through me being gay. That was kind of interesting. So as a judge and a justice, let me backtrack, okay. So I was a family, from 1995, I became a circuit court judge. And from 2000, I started applying to our appellate courts, our Intermediate Court of Appeals, and then to our Supreme Court. And I think and to federal court, and I think I applied 14 times and made 12 lists. But I was never selected, okay? From 2000 to 2010, I was not selected for any of these positions. And, you know, from 2002 to 2010, we had a Republican governor, and I was much too liberal for her. So, you know, at this level, it does become political. It's okay. But in 2010, a new governor was elected, Neil Abercrombie, and in January of 2011, he appointed me. So that's why I got to be a Supreme Court justice. But when I was appointed, because of what I had learned in family court, and then my then partner was there with my kids for the press conference, and the media was like, "Who are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm her partner." And they said, "Partner? Like law partner?" She goes, No, I'm not a lawyer." She's a sped teacher. "I'm not a lawyer, personal partner." And then the media was like, "Wait, can we talk to her about that?" And then so we had a family discussion, and we agreed that it was important for me to be out in public because, especially because of what the Asian and Pacific Islander kids are not coming out. And it wasn't just to provide, because I think representation matters. You know, I think it's important for you to see people in certain positions and people that look like you or have similar backgrounds to you or whatever, and think, "Oh, that person did it, I can do it too," right? So I wanted to be open and out. It's easier to be closeted. I mean, I wasn't really closeted. I wasn't closeted because I was out in my workplace, and the people, you know, I would bring my partner to lawyer functions and judge functions and things like that. But it wasn't like public, right? I mean, the people that came to my court did it. You know, I didn't talk about it. You know, I had really no reason to. But I decided it was really important for the young people to, you know, have more of an example of what you can do, and that you can have children, and you can have professional success. And I also wanted the parents to see that, you know, if they have kids that are LGBTQ, to not reject them, because they can have kids. You know, we can have a full life and not think that because of that you can't have a happy and full life. So I decided to be really open. So I talk about this a lot because I think it's important. And I remember being interviewed at that time, and like on Olelo, and I said, "I hope we get to the time that people are judged on their qualifications and on the content of their character instead of these like labels," right? And I'm happy to report that on January 12th, we have 5 justices. One of our new justices that was just appointed is also a lesbian woman. And the media didn't mention it at all, although she's out. It's not even mentioned anymore. It's not even something that, "Oh, lesbian judge," or, you know, it's like, it shouldn't be lesbian justice. It should just be justice, right? It shouldn't be women justice. It should just be justice, right? Or, you know, whatever ethnicity you may be. So I think things are getting a lot better. I've tried to use my position and platform to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion. I speak a lot to different organizations and groups, and I speak to kids, I speak to high school students, college, law school, and, you know, right now you guys see me and you probably think, "Oh, she's someone that's successful and confident." I wasn't like this when I was your age. I had so many self-doubts, right? So I want you guys to know that you can do anything too, right? You can be anything you want to be, right? Just so recognize that. I mean, I wasn't always comfortable speaking in front of groups of people like this. It's just something that you just have to keep practicing. So I encourage people to apply. Now, one thing that I have found, and I recognize that because I always went through, you know, what they call like imposter syndrome. I still deal with imposter syndrome sometimes, right? You feel like, oh God, I didn't go to the best schools, you know, and all this kind of stuff. And I also found there's an article in the magazine called The Atlantic. It's called The Confidence Gap. And it talks about how women, it's about women, but it talks about how women won't apply for a position unless they meet or exceed the minimum qualifications that's set, whereas men will apply even if they only meet 60% of the minimum qualifications. I saw that as the family court. I was what they call the presiding judge, the lead judge of family court. I sat on a committee that recommends to the Chief Justice for appointment what we call per diem, which is pro tem, or lawyers that serve as judges for a day when judges are on vacation, right? When the lower level judges are on vacation or are sick or there's a vacancy, lawyers fill those become part-time judges, right? So I sat on this committee and, you know, we were interviewing new applicants, and I'm looking at these resumes and I'm looking at these women and I'm looking at them going, why are you applying to be a part-time judge? You're so well qualified. You could be a full-time judge right now. You're so well qualified. And then I see these applications from some of the guys that they're lawyers, they're qualified as lawyers, but they have never, ever set foot in a courtroom as a litigator. And so, I'm sorry, but there's different kinds of lawyers. There's business lawyers. My son is a business lawyer. He doesn't go to court, you know. He's not going to be a judge. There's business lawyers, there's nonprofit lawyers, government lawyers, and then there's litigators, and only about 20% of lawyers go to court. You gotta have been a litigator to be a judge. You have to have courtroom experience. You have to understand how courtrooms work, right? So I was kind of shocked, and I saw that. And so what I say to you is, whether it's because you're a woman or whatever makes you feel that you don't belong, I'm here to tell you that you do belong and that you should try. You should try. And remember all the times I tried to become a judge or become an appellate judge or a Supreme Court justice, and all the times that I didn't get it, if I hadn't kept trying, I never would have made it. So you guys got to keep trying, right? And so I do a lot of things. I've worked on our dress code, so that, you know, it's not discriminatory between men, women, and LGBTQ people, right, as to what people can wear to come to court. I work on court rules to try to make them gender neutral. I worked on including gender identity and gender expression as prohibited categories of discrimination under the Code of Judicial Conduct. So judges cannot discriminate, and we work on things about, you know, how do, like, if you're not sure, you know, how do you deal with respecting people's pronouns, respecting what the names, you know, they want to use, things like that. Another thing that I've worked on, which really does affect a lot of women, was when I was heading family court. I remember there was a Chuukese woman with a grandmother with a legal aid attorney that came to court seeking guardianship of her grandchild. And the legal aid attorney is talking to me, and I'm like, does your client understand English? And he says, no. And I'm like, I said, okay, we're gonna break this right now. I want you to come back in 1 week, and we will have a Chuukese interpreter for her, because it's very important that she understands what's going on. And so we did, and then what I did was, in family court, which I had authority over, I instituted a policy that up until then, we were only providing interpreters for people that were charged with crimes, criminal defendants, or people that were facing termination of parental rights cases, right? People whose CPS cases, and they were threatening to terminate parental rights. And what I said is I instituted a policy saying that in First Oahu family courts will provide free language interpreters and counter assistance free of charge to anyone participating in the court system. And then that was in 2010, and then when I got to the Supreme Court in 2011, I pushed the Chief Justice to make that a statewide thing, and he agreed and he did it. So we became the first state to provide free interpreters for all people in all case types. It tends to affect women more just because it's people that can't afford a lawyer, an interpreter, right? And a lot of times they can't afford a lawyer too. I've been really active in domestic violence issues. I used to be a domestic violence judge, and I've been I headed family court. We have like this conference of people that deal with domestic violence issues. We try to make things, no system is perfect, but we try to make things easier for victims or survivors of domestic violence. I'm actually going to go to Okinawa next week to speak about domestic violence because Japan's system is so far behind. And as an aside, I will tell you that I think it's one of the reasons that domestic violence is taken so seriously in the United States now, and it's not perfect, it depends, but is because we have so many more women lawyers and women in law enforcement and women in education and women in positions of power, and that's because of Title IX. 50 years ago, if there was people called and there was a domestic violence, the police would say, oh, this is just a family matter, and leave. And now we have all of these laws to try to protect the victim, whoever the victim is, right? So it does make a difference. So I've tried to make rules that are, I was really actively involved in trying to, we now, sexual harassment by an attorney is now attorney misconduct. I got that included. And it's not just sexual harassment on the job, but it's like if it's like at a lawyer's or a judge's function, and like a partner is kind of like coming on to a young woman and kind of suggesting that if they get together, she might get a job, that type of thing, or just harassing people, it's now considered attorney misconduct that you can be disciplined for as a lawyer. And let's see, a lot of opinions that I write. I've tried to increase access to justice by making it easier for people to come to court and not get their cases dismissed, to have their cases heard on the merits, especially if you don't have a lawyer, that will actually go do the legal research ourselves and try to figure out what they're trying to say and what they're trying to do. So I've written a bunch of opinions that have like women that have represented themselves have won at the Hawaiʻi Supreme Court. We also created an appellate pro bono program where people that come to the Supreme Court and don't have a lawyer, pro bono lawyers will represent them. I write a lot about women's issues, about domestic violence, gender bias in the courts. I've also been really involved in implicit bias issues within the judiciary. We have mandatory implicit bias training because implicit and cognitive biases still exist, right? So we're conscious of it. It was really interesting. Our first implicit bias training, we did the Harvard IAT. Has anyone heard of the Harvard IAT? Yeah, okay. So Harvard Implicit Association Test. Just go online, Harvard IAT. And you can go online and take these tests. And I did the first one in front of the entire state judiciary. And I did it on women in the profession, working women, professional women. And it came out that I had implicit biases against working women. what I'm trying to tell you is to recognize that because of the culture, and it depends on how you grow up and the cultures in society and, you know, how you're growing up, you can have implicit biases against yourself, your own groups. I had implicit biases against LGBTQ people, of people with darker skin color. And I'm sad, but it's it's the society in which I grew up. So recognize that, you know, and we've talked about this sometimes, like, not all women, especially women my age, are supportive of other women. There seems to be a tendency, like sometimes in law firms, they think there's only room for one woman, and so they're not necessarily supportive of the other women. So it's really, really important. There's much more room. There's room for at least 50% women in everything, right? And so it's really important to recognize that we all do have implicit biases, and we have to fight them ourselves, and that we have to be supportive and reach out our hands to other people. And it's not, to me, it's not just about women or LGBTQ people. It's about people of socioeconomic status. You know, we're really trying to, I'm encouraging this Tongan woman to go to law school. We've never had a Tongan woman lawyer here, as far as I know. We're trying to increase the number of Micronesian lawyers. We haven't had a Micronesian judge. You know, we need representation, right? So, so whatever you're doing, be supportive of each other, help each other. And just like, you know, I was helped by like a former judge, I've been helped all along by people that supported me. And it wasn't just women, it was men too that have helped support. And so that's what we all have to do for each other. I do a lot of, you know, I write in Japanese law review articles. I wrote about Dobbs and abortion rights. So I just want to leave you with you. I also speak in like India. They have so few women judges. So we have to support each other. Title IX, I mentioned it. In 1950, there was only 3%, less than 3% of attorneys in the United States were women. Now it's 39%. And now for federal judges, 39% are women. In state courts, only 34% of judges overall are women. But Hawaii, we're actually doing better. 42% of lawyers in Hawaii are women. 50% of our state court judges are women. And 60% of the law school is now women, 55% nationwide. So we still have a way to go. It's really much better for the social sciences, but you know, for like STEM, there's still not as many women, and not as many women professors. So we still have a way to go, but we have come a long way, and I believe I have stood on the shoulders of giants like Patsy Takemoto Mink and Patsy Dung and Marie Nakanishi Milks and Bambi Hefel. And I hope that all of you can stand on the shoulders of people like me to move ahead. And as you do so, please support each other. Okay? Aloha. Thank you. I talked longer than I thought I would. So questions? Any questions? Comments? Experiences? Yes?
The bias test for freshman year last year for high school, I gotta be honest, some of the questions, it feels like they're trying to push you to feel like you're biased. What's your thoughts on that?
You took that test, yeah. No, I understand, yeah. I can see that there might be some criticism of the test, yeah. But try it and see what you guys think, right? Yeah. But what's really interesting, I forgot to mention, is that my daughter takes the test and she comes out no biases. She doesn't have biases. She is not biased against women. She's not biased against people of color. She's not biased against LGBTQ people. So that's why I felt that maybe the test does have more validity, because if, you know, my daughter, who is hopefully growing up in a household that, just always, never like pushed down people because of whatever category, right? She's coming out with no biases, so I really, really like that. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Yes.
How do you find the motivation and resilience to keep trying after over and over again?
That's a really, really good question. And you're right. There were times that I'd go through the interview with the governor, and then I'd get the call that I was not selected, and then I would cry. I would break down, I would cry. And it would take me a couple days to get back up. Yeah, so don't think that I was totally not affected by this. And you're gonna go through ups and downs in life, right? Whatever it might be, it could be what college you're accepted to, or what job you get or you don't get, or whatever. There are gonna be ups and downs, but I think I found motivation in the support of friends and family. And also I find that when I have a group of friends, we call ourselves the Goodsill Girls, because it was the law firm, Goodsill, Anderson, Quinn, and Stifel, and there was a lot of women that started around the same time, and we were the first wave of women lawyers at the firm. We get together once a month. First Monday, they were just over at my house on Monday, and we support each other throughout the years. We haven't done it all. It was only in the last 20 years that we've gone to doing this, because we were also busy with our own lives, having children, establishing our careers. But now we get together and we talk, and as we're going through things, we support each other. So it's really important to have friends that you can talk to that will support you. I also find it helpful, even coming to a talk like this, where I'm talking about these things, it gives me renewed commitment and renewed. So I think it's important to go to talks like this, or to go to meetings like this, where you're around like-minded people that you believe are going to be supportive, and you can commiserate and help each other. I remember when I was a young lawyer, we were at a bar meeting. When I say bar, I don't mean drinking bar. I mean the lawyer bar, okay, the bar. I was at a bar function, and I remember there was a couple of us that were minority lawyers talking, and because back then still the Hawaii bar was really, really controlled by white men. And I remember saying, we've got to change the face of this. We've got to change the leadership. And it wasn't until 2009 that we even got a woman president of the Bar Association. But we keep pushing, and we keep talking about it, and we recommend each other. We support each other. I'm in the position now where, there's openings, and then we'll get together and say, who do you think will be good for this? And we'll even call the person and say, you need to apply for this position. We will help you, whether it's a judgeship for anything else, whether a board or commission or whatever kind of position, we will help each other and support each other. And at this point, it's harder, right? At my age, at your age, but I want you guys to know that people in power and the legislature, and they want to hear from young people. They want to hear what you have to say, right? So I really encourage you, one of the easiest ways to get involved is neighborhood board or city council or the legislature right now when they're considering bills. And the most important thing is to vote. And I don't care who you vote for, you need to vote, because unfortunately young people don't vote as the same percentage as old people like my age. And so, people that are running for office are looking at who is going to re-elect you, right? And so it's really important for you guys to get involved in not just voting yourself, but also getting other young people to vote. Because I'm people, you can't, it's like, oh, it's not going to make a difference. No, it makes a difference. If young people came out in droves, something would be done about climate change, right? Something would be done about some of this discrimination that we're going through. So you do have a voice, but you've got to exercise it. And don't be afraid to speak up, right? Yeah. Great question, though. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yes?
Being the diverse boiling pot Hawaii is, do you think we as a state overcame those implicit biases quite yet?
Good question. The question is whether, because we are such a diverse state, do you think we've overcome the implicit biases? I would say we've come a long way, but not completely yet, right? Like we haven't had a woman chief justice yet in our entire history. Yeah. You had another question?
If not, how could we grow as a community to overcome that?
Yes, how could we grow as a community to overcome that? I think it's really important to make people aware that we all have implicit biases. I think most people are aware of that now, that there are cognitive biases that exist, and but when I was your age, we weren't trained on these things. I mean, I remember taking Psych 100, but I didn't really pursue psychology, but I don't remember hearing about this until like the last 20 years or so, right? So there's just so much more awareness of this now, because you see it, and you still see it. When I headed family court, and I was going to start at my court, one of the last things that I did was approve the University of Hawaii's researchers to come in to review family court juvenile statistics to see if our family court was having bias against certain ethnicities or things like that. And because what I said was, I said, okay, so my oldest son went to Iolani. My daughter went to Punahou. My third kid went to Kalani, right? I said, when Iolani has a no school day and the kids are hanging out at Kahala Mall, and it's only Iolani kids at Kahala Mall, I have never seen a police officer stop them and ask them, why aren't you in school? But around that time we had a case where a young Hawaiian girl was walking near Waianae High School, and she was pulled over and arrested for truancy. And I'm like, why is she getting pulled? Why you're not stopping people from that maybe look a certain way, or dress a certain way, or are in certain areas. So the study did show that at the point of initial contact, there was discrimination going on. Ethnic discrimination was going on, right? I was really pleased to find that, but when it came to adjudication at the family court level, they didn't see any statistics showing bias by the judges. But the point of initial contact does make a huge difference, right? And there's all these studies that show, disparate impact of incarceration on Native Hawaiian men. There's studies that show that in terms of family court, in terms of who's more likely, what ethnicities are more likely to have their children removed when there's a report to CPS, right? And there is, unfortunately, there's been showings of some discrimination along those lines. So in any event, yes, we still do have some, but we have to keep talking about it. And what's important is that, so many people are getting trained on it and being aware of it. I remember as a family court judge, I'm deciding a custody issue. And I'm actually listing the pros and cons of each parent. And I'm sitting here thinking, all right, am I now thinking that I'm going to award custody to the mother because she's a woman? Or is it because of other, legitimate criteria and factors? And so it's really important to, I think, be really conscious of it and actually because, cognitive biases and implicit biases are, it's how humans survive, right? It's like you need, this is danger, like fight or flight type reflex, right? And there's some like genetic or biological reasons for why we have some of these biases or stereotypes. But so sometimes it's helpful, like I read an article in the, there's a woman, young women won't go jogging with a ponytail because, or it's so funny because, I'm like, oh, my colleagues, these men tell me, oh, you got to listen to this podcast. You like to go walking. Listen to these podcasts while you're walking. And I'm like, yeah, I'm an old woman, but I'm not going to walk with a podcast because I need to be aware of my surroundings. Even old women get raped sometimes, or get dragged in or something. So I'm going to always be aware of what I'm doing while I'm walking. And I felt like, wow, you guys don't understand your male privilege, that you feel like you can do this and you're not even worried about it. There's certain things that you don't think about as guys, whereas women do tend to think about these things. But we do have these wariness and we have these things that we think about which are actually protective, but we have to use it in a way that helps us but doesn't hurt other people because of the biases that we have. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Anything from the professors? Yes?
Some of my friends, they tend to not vote because they believe that since Hawaii is such a leading state, that it would not matter. And so leading on to that, about your point about the child court, they believe that since we're in Hawaii, it's almost always a 50% custody for both parents.
Right. We do have kind of like a presumption, or if we do favor joint custody, but it's not always going to be like that. Some of the toughest cases that I ever dealt with as a family court judge was when one parent wanted to relocate, move out of state or to another island with the child. Those are the tough cases, right? And I think it's important, as long as the parents, parents don't know, there's no parents that are perfect. My parents weren't perfect. I'm definitely not perfect. But I think it's important for children to have both parents in their lives. But I know it, I have mixed emotions sometimes, because it's sometimes, God, I see these kids, dragging their overnight bags, and they spend 1 week, they're coming to school on Monday with their bag because they spent 1 week with the other parent, and that week they're going back to the other parent. I'm like, God, I wonder what that's like. But it seems like, I guess it depends on the person. Sometimes they adjust, and it depends, when you're younger, but then when you start to get older and you're like in high school and you got all these activities you want to do, then like if one parent lives on this side and the other parent lives on the other side, and your school is on this side, it's going to be hard, right? So adjustments have to be made. But yeah, we do tend to favor joint custody. But you were also talking about voting,
Yeah,
right?
Hawaii is such a leading state that some of my friends find it not motivating enough to vote because that is the reason they take their vote.
Yeah, I understand that concern, but, nothing changes unless you start voting, right? And that's why I think it's really important to get involved and start voting. I mean, there are, at least in local races, right? Like there.
Oh, they vote on that.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like the presidency? They're not going to vote for the presidency? Congress and the presidency? Yeah, I guess, but, just by voting and a negative vote, a vote for the other person tells the person, even if they win, how much support they have and what support they don't have. So they need to start looking at those things, right? So I think it makes a difference. I do think it makes a difference. If someone that's winning as presidency here, like a high percentage of the youth vote went to the other side, even if they won, they would start looking at that and think, what is it about our policies that we're not addressing it? So why are young people voting so much for the other side? So it does make a difference, because they break it down by, not just by region, but also by age. They try to get a sense of who's voting, right? And who's voting for who. And what policies are affecting those votes. So I think it's important that people vote. Please do vote. Please, please do vote. I encourage you to vote. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I saw that article about women wearing ponytails out running.
Yes.
And my first thought was, oh God, I wear a ponytail.
Yes.
And I run in the morning when
Yes.
it's dark, and I also like to run at night when it's dark. And so my first thought was fear. And then my second thought was, I really resent the media for putting fear into women. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that women are much more likely to be assaulted by a significant other than they are a stranger.
Absolutely.
So we should be more concerned with what's going on in the home than whether or not women are wearing ponytails.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. That's a really, really good point. All of the statistics show that, stranger rape is so unusual. My friends that have been raped, it's all been by people they know. Yeah. So.
So listen to that podcast when you go for a walk.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I should. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for raising that. Any other questions, comments?
We have a couple comments from the Zoom.
Oh, okay.
One saying, mahalo, sharing all your important and effective work and being a giant for us. One saying, inspiring talk, thank you so much. And another saying, mahalo nui for your inspiring talk and your story.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for participating even via Zoom. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so maybe if there's no more questions, we'll break it, or?
I have this sort of list of questions, but we would be here for
Oh, no, please, because we do have time.
So, someone's wondering if you could comment about all of the anti-LGBT or anti-trans specifically bills that we see going across the country, and it seems like it's somewhat of a backlash, and wondering what you think about what's happening in the country.
Clearly, it's a backlash, and in my view, it's like it's how the conservatives used the gay issue back in the 80s, like anti-gays and lesbians, and whatever her name, Anita, whatever she was from Florida. And then Bryant, yeah. And then they used same-sex marriage as like this rallying thing, So now they're using, the fear of trans women, and trans women in restrooms, and trans women in sports. I wrote an article on transgender women in sports and Title IX, and I moderated a panel at National Asian Pacific American Bar Association on trans women in sports. But they're just using this as a something to get people riled up, right? There's been like one trans woman that has like won something at the NCAA. And then what are we going to say? It's a way to hurt women. How are we going to know if a woman is trans? Who tends to get targeted? It's going to be women of color, because people with larger bone structure, they're the ones that are going to be tested to see if they're really a woman, right? But what I always say is, that's the only thing, and there's not going to be any. What are you going to say, that intersex people can't play sports because they're not, clearly a binary one way or the other? When I played sports, there were women that were taller than me, faster than me, much more talented than me. I thought what I had going for me was my ability to memorize all the rules. I knew all the rules, and I could play smartly, even though I wasn't as great an athlete. So there's going to be genetic differences no matter what. And to me, to not allow a young person, when sports was really important to me in high school and college. It's not important to me anymore. I mean, I enjoy watching and I enjoy that type of thing, but to not allow people whose sports is their identity, to not allow them to participate and say, you can't represent your school or your university, I think that just really sucks, candidly. So I really, that's my feeling on it. And I think they're just using it as a rallying thing. And it's like, when this goes away, I don't know what the next thing is going to be, but it's a way to try to rally people around. And I'll tell you, when I first came to Hawaii, I used to go to there was a place called the Glades on Hotel Street. And they would have like drag shows, and stuff. And I was always in the bathroom with the trans women, right? I wasn't scared of that. What are you talking about? It's so silly, Anyway, so that's what I think about these things.
Well, I know a lot of people have classes probably they need to get to, and we're just so honored to have you here, Justice McKenna.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, and I wish you the very best. Vote and be inclusive, and know that you can do anything you want to do. Aloha. Mahalo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.